Can you see my presentation?
It's just blank or black on one
Just
side, white
black.
on the other.
Pardon me.
There it is.
How about now?
Yep,
Yeah?
we can see
Okay,
it now.
great. Whew. Thank you so much. Good morning, Mayor Kuchar and councillors. It's a pleasure for me to join you today and speak a little bit about the work that is done by the North Saskatchewan Watershed Alliance. My name is Mary Ellen Shane. I'm a senior watershed coordinator here with the North Saskatchewan Watershed Alliance. So I'd just like to begin by acknowledging that the watershed of the North Saskatchewan River, it does lie in the territories of Treaty 6 and Treaty 8, and also the Métis homeland. And it's also one of the largest communities, largest Inuit communities south of the 60th parallel. So in my generally every year or so, the NSWA, we do seek to reconnect with municipalities across our watershed. And my goal with this presentation today is to introduce you to the NSWA for those of you who don't know us, and to reconnect with some of those of you who do. And so our presentation will also highlight some of the projects that we're currently working on, and they'll just represent a bit of a snapshot of those activities that we undertake every year. And finally, our goal is also to briefly touch base with you on the value of the partnership with the NSWA as a nonprofit organization between us and the municipalities and other partners in our watershed. So I do know that my time with you here today is limited, and so I want to respect your counsel. So I will skip over just some slides for good time management. The North Saskatchewan Watershed Alliance is an organization who works to improve the health of our watershed. We know that this is not something that any one organization can do on its own. So a key part of our work is bringing partners together to collaborate and to plan, as well as conserve and to educate. Officially, our mission reads that we protect and improve water quality and water quantity and in-stream flow, as well as the health of our watershed, by seeking and sharing knowledge, by facilitating partnerships, and by collaborating through collaborative planning processes and working in an adaptive management kind of way. The NSWA, we are a charitable nonprofit organization with a multi-sector board of directors, and our board spans municipalities, industries, nonprofits, academia, provincial government, and members at large. We are strongly supported by municipalities of all sizes across our watershed. And our water, as you may recall, the provincial Water for Life strategy sets out 3 goals for directing watershed management in the province. And so those goals are: 1, for safe and secure drinking water; a healthy aquatic ecosystem; and finally, a reliable quantity of water, sorry, for the economy. 3 directions that we work in order to bring this to life is with knowledge and research, through partnerships, and water conservation. So just to give you a little bit of information about our watershed itself, the NSWA is really quite a very large area. It includes our river is 1,200 kilometers long from the main stem, from the Rocky Mountains to the Saskatchewan border, and it covers an area of 57,000 square kilometers. It includes 75 municipalities with populations ranging from under 100 to of course more than 1 million, with the city of Edmonton. This watershed supports an incredible diversity of industry and business and agriculture. Our headwaters begins in the forested eastern slopes of the Rocky Mountains, and the majority of the water, and that makes up the majority of the water that ends up in the main stem of the river. And a central portion of the watershed, it flattens out and is mostly populated that's where a lot of our industry and agricultural use is. And as we move eastward, the watershed, it becomes a lot drier and a lot flatter, and is predominantly used for agricultural use. The NSWA, we carry out our work with partners across this very large area. The North Saskatchewan pardon me. The NSWA has several key responsibilities, as I mentioned earlier. The first, perhaps that is the most important, is that we're considered collaborative spark plugs, by which we often bring organizations together that bring partners together to achieve projects that improve watershed health. Another aspect is that our what we do is watershed assessment and planning. And so this looks like some of the big plans that we have, like our integrated watershed management plan. We do a great deal of focusing on education and outreach events that are intended to connect with our organizations. And finally, we work to build tools and technology that can support partners in their everyday watershed work. So this slide simply is intended to show the variety and breadth of the projects that the NSWA has going on. And we'll be highlighting just a little dabbling of those. And while many of these circles are represented represent projects and activities that are really important, I just wanted to kind of point out the fact that the top circle is labeled our subwatershed alliances. And this is really key to how we work with municipalities and bringing them together. We have three different alliances, one for our upstream headwaters area, one for the Sturgeon Central area, and then also as well for the Vermilions, which is downstream of us. And then we also have a subwatershed alliance that's just beginning to form, which is called our Urban Creeks Collaborative. And these groups are really important to how the NSWA works, because it really brings us that local perspective about the challenges and solutions and opportunities that are available to help us really improve the watershed. So I will just take a second to talk a little bit about just a couple of projects. One is our State of the Watershed project. And so with the State of the Watershed project, it's one of our key responsibilities of the North Saskatchewan, of any watershed group, to report on in a bit of like a report card style the health of our watershed. This year, we're beginning to use something called the Freshwater Health Index, which is really exciting. It was an index developed by Conservation International, and helps us evaluate the health of the watershed in a really standardized, scalable type of way. What's also really exciting about this project is that it's heavily stakeholder driven. And the last time we did a report card on our State of the Watershed for the whole basin was about 20 years ago. So it's exciting to be able to have an update on the health of our watershed overall. Another aspect of our work is engaging residents. So we do quite a bit of outreach events, working with many municipalities across the watershed, even attending the types of outreach community events that you might have. We hold workshops on specific types of topics, as well as webinars for general awareness about watershed health. We publish newsletters, and we carry out a lot of these messages to residents that also are in Fort Saskatchewan. These are just some of the photos from some of the events that we had this summer. Another project that we're working on is a wetland strategy. This work came out as a result of some direction that we got from those intermunicipal subwatershed alliances, telling us that they wanted to have some amount of common vision across municipalities for what to do about wetlands. And so this strategy really speaks to a regional watershed vision for wetlands, and identify some potential ways that we can collectively enhance wetland management. So why does a regional wetland management vision matter to you, Fort Saskatchewan? Well, most creeks are transboundary, and wetlands make up a big part of their watersheds. So if you take a creek like Ross Creek, for example, its headwaters is in Strathcona, and its downstream portion obviously passes through Fort Saskatchewan. So any loss of the wetlands that occur in that watershed can mean a change in the flow of Ross Creek itself, which can result in things like higher flash amounts of water going through Ross Creek in the spring. And lower water levels in the summer, drier times. So as you can imagine, this can have an impact on your municipality. So as with everything else that we do, our wetland strategy is really advisory in nature, and each partner decides what they're going to do to advance their own wetland management. And the strategy itself is simply just a map of how we can really move forward together. Another type of project that we're working on is around working similarly for helping watersheds or lake stewardship groups. Lake stewardship groups move ahead similarly in a way that we're doing for wetlands, so that we're not kind of dealing with lake issues one by one. We're trying to take a bit more of a strategic approach. So I'll just pass over that one. Another project that we've been working on for quite a while is our Riparian Health Action Plan. This is one of our longest standing initiatives, and it began with the development of development of a new method to evaluate riparian health using satellite. It's a very cost-effective means of evaluating our shorelines. And we use this tool in order to map the vast majority of our wetlands across our watershed. So with that, we also created a strategy with that one as well. We set a target of 65% health. That's what we're aiming for as an intermunicipal group and as an inter-stakeholder community in our watershed. And then we built some tools in order to help anyone who lives next to a riparian area understand what their impact is, and provide them some resources to get from point A to point B, get from poorer health to better health. So that would be our Riparian web portal. And I just want to mention that the Riparian web portal itself had won an Emerald Award this past year. So continuing to move on that project, some key projects that are underway at the moment related to that project is one is about policy alignment. And so we are working with a local consulting firm to help evaluate riparian bylaws across municipalities in our watershed. I believe Fort Saskatchewan was assessed. And then we've been working this over the summer to host workshops to begin hearing back from municipalities. And then based on that feedback, the consulting firm is creating a best management guide around riparian bylaws. We've also been working on developing some guidance with a setback calculator to help better inform maybe what kinds of setbacks might be needed in order to protect riparian areas. So finally, I just wanted to talk about the benefits of partnership with the North Saskatchewan River Watershed Alliance, and talk about how some of these partnerships could how we could both benefit. So NSWA, we do actually ask municipalities for a contribution to support our ongoing operations and projects. For 17 years, we've asked for a contribution of 50 cents per capita and have kept that request really steady. This year, we did have a review and discovered that inflation had actually increased by over 48% in those last 17 years. So we have adjusted our rate and are now asking for 60 cents per person. And we have a briefing note about that in case you wanted to find out more. and we'd also like to take a moment to highlight some of the benefits that you might get from such a contribution. So as you'll have noted throughout my presentation, some of the key things that we do include driving collaboration. We facilitate intermunicipal discussions through some of these alliances. We actually leverage a lot of NSWA support, or sorry, some of the donations that we get, we leverage that with provincial grants in order to come up with projects that have regional benefits. In-house expertise, so we're often available for municipal staff to rely on for feedback on projects, and which we have done with Fort Saskatchewan in this past year, and education and awareness, and we provide resources to residents. So we do connect with your residents, and with some of our outreach, with our newsletters and our webinars that we host on a regular basis to help everybody kind of elevate their understanding about the health of our watershed. So that's really what I have to offer today. I just wanted to say thank you for allowing me the opportunity to connect with you, and for your support of our watershed and our organization. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have at this time.
Great. Thank you very much for your presentation, Mary. And I'm sure there will be some questions.
Great.
Councillor Macon, go ahead.
Thanks for your presentation. I only had one question. You had mentioned that the last State of the Watershed had occurred about 20 years ago. So I was just wondering if within the work that you're doing now for the report card, are they determining a more consistent approach to getting that report card so that they can see changes more readily?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It would be great to be able to do updates to the state of the watershed on a 5 or 10-year basis. So with this new approach, it should be much, much easier for us to kind of, when new data becomes available, to just simply plug into the new index and be able to kind of see changes more readily. And so being able to do that really depends on being able to get that data. So I'll give you the riparian as an example. We created this data set around our riparian health, and we can easily include that in this new State of the Watershed Index. When new data, riparian data, becomes available, we can upload that to the index and should be able to see a change fairly simply.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm next in the speaking order. So 2 questions. So first of all, wetland strategy, when you talk about it, the provincial government already requires us to review our wetlands through our land use planning. So is that not duplication? Because we can't just take out a wetland if there's not another wetland being put in somewhere else.
That is a good question. I think what we have seen is that the provincial government, they do definitely offer some strategizing around keeping wetlands on the landscape, and municipalities themselves also have sometimes their own priorities for maintaining certain wetlands, keeping certain wetlands on your landscape, especially those that are so closely aligned with your infrastructure, for example. So a regional approach to wetland management might look like offering some insight as to how wetlands can influence intermunicipal flows as well. And then it also offers some not all resources that are available are readily understood at a provincial level, or they're not available across the province, and they are available locally. And so the strategy is allowing us to understand what our regional resources are, and be able to kind of like learn from each other, and learn from each other, create a platform for municipalities to sit together and learn from each other as they're applying wetland restoration within their municipalities. There's some learning lessons there, so that knowledge transfer can happen at a regional level.
Okay, well, I would probably challenge you to challenge your board on that one, because I think the provincial government's got the highest authority on that.
Okay.
And you can sit around and talk about it, but I would probably challenge them that through our land use planning, there are requirements that we have to do. So that was my first question. My second question, you said raising your revenue from 50 cents per capita to 60?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I guess my question is, this is voluntary. There is no mandate.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so as we go through our budget, perhaps we say, well, we don't want to pay 60 cents. Are you going to be happy with 50 cents, or are you happy with 0?
No, we'll be happy with 50 cents. This is something that we're moving to. We're happy to accept any donation level that your municipality is comfortable with. So we understand that it takes time to do budgeting, and so maybe this is something that you consider in next year's budget or future years. But no, we will certainly be happy with the 50 cents per capita. Thank you so much.
Okay, just wanted to check. Councillor Harris, you're next.
Looking back at your map where you lay out the interconnectedness of the different watersheds, I'm reading that obviously the North Saskatchewan River probably starts at the extreme west side of the Ram watershed, according to your map. Is that a fair assessment? And ultimately, and that's starting out at the Brazeau Reservoir, which ultimately is an important water source for the continuation of supply into the river. So, to put it simply, you're talking about catchment areas for other rivers and whatnot that ultimately find their way into the North Saskatchewan River. Is that a fair assessment relative to what the watershed is?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Our watershed encompasses the Ram River and the catchment area that flows into the Brazeau Dam, as well as the Bighorn Dam at Lake Abraham. And both of those dams feed water that go into the main stem of the North Saskatchewan River. So
And so those come out of various glacial feeds, obviously. Now, looking at your map, you've got Jasper and Banff. Obviously, Jasper, the Athabasca River, eventually flows to the north, way to the north. And so, does it really impact the North Saskatchewan in that regard? Am I reading that right or wrong?
It's a small portion of Jasper Park is in our watershed. So the portion that flows into the Athabasca River is not part of our watershed.
Okay.
So a greater part of the Banff National Park flows into our watershed.
Okay, good. Okay, I was just looking for clarification because I'm familiar with the Athabasca from that standpoint, and I was kind of drawing a blank in relation to how that would co-combine with the water that ultimately runs past us every day. So thank you for that clarification.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Councillor Kelly.
Yes, thank you. Good day, Mary Ellen. I'm going to follow up on Councillor Harris's line of discussion around the western edge of the watershed. It's been an ongoing concern of mine now for several years as I read about the shrinkage of the glacier pack in that particular area of Alberta. It's the headwater to the North Saskatchewan River, not the entire watershed, obviously, but to the North Saskatchewan River, which is the source of the drinking water for 2 or 3 million people, if not more. So is your organization involved in any way in forecasting the supply of the North Saskatchewan River 10 or 20 or 30 years out as that glacier pack continues to shrink? And what the impact would be when and if it does?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for that question. So the provincial government has done quite a bit of work forecasting the amount of water that we should be expecting in the North Saskatchewan Basin. And generally, we're expecting to have a little bit more water in our watershed than what we're currently experiencing. The glaciers account for about 2% of that annual flow in the North Saskatchewan main stem, and the snowpack that exists in our headwaters area is a very large contributor of the flows of the main stem. And so is our organization involved with the forecasting? That would be in the hands of the provincial government. But we do use the information in order to collaborate with the other people that are the other stakeholders in our watershed to better understand how we can all better work together in order to make sure that the needs of everyone in the watershed are being met by the expected flows.
So just to summarize, I honestly thought that the glacier impact would be larger than 2%, but the current consensus is it's approximately 2% of the annual flow.
2% of the annual flow, yeah.
And
so in summer months, it would be considered a higher percentage because we're not getting as much of that coming off of the any from the snowpack, because the snowpack would have melted by then. So in the summer months where you normally have lower river levels, that glacier feed actually keeps the river quite a bit higher.
Thank you, because you anticipated sort of my next question. I'm sure that the glacial feed is a much higher percentage of the summer flow.
Yes, absolutely.
Given that the 3 million or 4 million people that drink water from that rivershed drink water every day. Mm-hmm. Any idea on where our drinking water is going to come from in the dry summer months going forward?
I think we can safely anticipate that we're going to have enough water for our drinking water supplies. And luckily, the dams do a good job in terms of keeping the water supply regulated so that we have enough water in the summertime to supply drinking water for residents, and then also keep enough flow in the river for the environment as well. So the dams do quite a bit of that river regulation, which we benefit from in terms of summer flows to make sure that they don't get too low.
Thank you. I find that reassuring. I just wonder why it's not more common knowledge, and maybe it is, and I'm simply missing it. Mayor Katcher, I've got a couple other questions. I can pause or continue as you see fit.
There's nobody else on the speaking order right now.
Okay, easier questions, I think. Is there any overlap or intersection, or do you have any comments you'd like to share with us regarding the Heritage River concept that's being promoted in the area currently and has been for the last couple of years?
Oh, there's certainly overlap. Yes, our organization has been designated as the organization to carry that work forward. So our organization had initially, many decades ago, had initially begun the process of getting the Heritage River designation, but at the time, it didn't have the political support for it. So we had done the work at that time in order to get the state of the environment or the reporting that was required on the state of the condition of the North Saskatchewan River that was needed in order to submit those applications. With this new approval process, we are very heavily involved with it and are very supportive of it.
Okay, thank you. And just following up on Mayor Katcher's questions or comments, what is your organization's annual budget, if you don't mind sharing? And do you prepare financial statements? And if so, are those available publicly?
Oh, yes, certainly. We go through an auditing process every year, and those those documents are available in our annual report, which I can certainly email to you. And you got me stumped because I haven't checked quite this year what it is, but I believe our operating grant is just under. It could be about 800,000 a year. I would have to double check on that though. And then we also use leverage that money in order. We also, in addition to that 800,000 or our operating grant, we also apply for grants every year from the provincial government, and we're managing those. And so I think in addition to the operating, there's also perhaps about a $300,000 contribution from those grants every year for project delivery.
So just to summarize, yes, I would like to see your statement. If you don't mind kicking council off a copy or administration, they can forward it on to us.
For sure.
To summarize, approximately $1 million a year in operating expenses or budget would be fair?
Under $1 million for operating, and then additional funds for projects.
Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate the questions or your answer.
Okay,
I appreciate the questions.
Great. Thank you very much. That looks like all of the questions. So thank you for your annual update and information sharing. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Bye now.
Okay, bye-bye. Okay, the next item that we have is our RCMP Multi-Year Financial Plan. Inspector Barry Larocque and Corinne Rayner, Director of Protective Services. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and members of Council. My name is Corinne Rayner. I'm the Director of Protective Services, and presenting with me is Inspector Barry Larocque, the Detachment Commander of the RCMP. We are here to present to Council the RCMP 2024 Multi-Year Financial Plan. This plan is a 5-year financial forecast to help guide the planning process for our Municipal Police Service Agreement, and is done in consultation with the RCMP and administration. We are seeing a significant increase to the RCMP budget forecast for 2024. Administration and the Detachment Commander felt it was important to inform Council on these increases and the budgeting strategy. The multi-year financial plan has evolved over time. It is an important document that builds the RCMP budget and is signed by the Mayor as an agreement in principle. The plan details the staffing resources and pay, operation and maintenance costs, capital, and other indirect costs associated to the management of the RCMP. All of these costs combined make up the RCMP yearly forecast and give us a per member cost each year, which helps guides our budgeting. Fort Saskatchewan, with a population over 15,000, pays 90% of those costs for policing, with the remaining 10% cost shared with the federal government. I'll now turn it over to Inspector Larocque to give you some details of the multi-year financial plan.
Good afternoon, Council, Mayor. Fort Saskatchewan Detachment currently sits at 33 established positions, which includes 2 STE surplus positions, and I'll explain those a little bit later. Which means we would typically budget and maintain a staffing level of 31, which means that the city is contractually obligated for 31 positions. The other 2 positions, STE, are utilized. It's an internal mechanism for us to bring bodies in so that we can manage the soft vacancies throughout the year. The detachment has 4 watches with a corporal in charge of each, 5 to 6 constables per watch, and they're doing the frontline boots on the ground policing. We have specialized RCMP units made up of GIS, which is our General Investigation Section, Traffic Crime Reduction Unit, a School Resource Officer, a community policing officer, and a domestic violence coordinator. And all those positions are enhanced positions paid for by the city. Vacancies are a reality of policing in today's world. We have both hard and soft vacancies throughout the year. The detachment has been seeing a yearly average vacancy rate of about 15%, which is approximately 4.5 positions vacant per year due to the vacancies. A hard vacancy is when we have a position unfilled due to a transfer or a relocation, and a soft vacancy occur when a member goes off leave for more than 30 days. And this leave can include illness, injury, maternity, and paternity leave. I talked about the STE before. The surplus to establishment is an RCMP internal way of managing soft vacancies. The 2 STE positions are not budgeted for, nor is the expectation of the city to pay for those positions, as the vacancies that we carry would cover those off. We have been managing the vacancies with the STE positions as needed and by utilizing specialty units to fill shortages of uniformed police officers. The consequence of this is proactive work of community policing, intelligence gathering, and drug enforcement is reduced because those members are answering calls for service. The RCMP use a working FTE utilization formula to forecast the budget, and this formula taking the 33 established positions minus the average vacancy rate to determine the FTE forecast. This budget strategy helps municipalities budget as close as possible to actual costs at the end of the year and mitigates large surpluses. And Corinne will talk about the staffing levels.
This slide, sorry about that. This slide shows you the staffing level history over the last 4 years and the forecast for 2 years. It will also help to explain the budgeting strategy used by the RCMP and administration. There are 3 aspects to this chart that you're seeing, with the blue line as our established positions that the city has requested, which does include those 2 STE positions, the budgeted FTE in orange, and the gray line is the actual working FTE that were realized at the end of the fiscal year. The budgeting strategy incorporates a budgeted working FTE. This is that orange line that you're seeing. And it is calculated taking the number of established positions minus the forecasted vacancies for the coming year. This working FTE rate is set in consultation with the detachment commander and administration as a forecast of the staffing levels for the year. We look at the past history of what we're seeing as that average vacancy rate and what's on the horizon for transfers in and out and potential leave throughout the year. This is a forecast for the year and can differ from the actuals. The detachment budgets according to 33 established positions. So if you look at the 2022-23 fiscal year, we take the established positions less that average vacancy rate, and we budgeted the orange line around 27 officers for our last year. And the actuals for that year came in closer to 29. This is the average that we're seeing, and the budgeted working FTE, as Inspector Larocque has said, helps us to align our budget to the actuals. The budgeting strategy was implemented by the RCMP to alleviate municipal budget challenges and surpluses due to vacancies. With the recent increases to the RCMP costs due to pay increases and the new per member cost for 2024, we are seeing a deficit within our current budgeted amount for the RCMP budget, and we will require an increase for 2024. I'll be touching a little bit more on those details later in the presentation and give it back over to Inspector Larocque.
The last resource increase was in 2021 with the domestic violence coordinator. There has been no increase to the regular member establishment since then. The police resource methodology to determine if we are adequately staffed incorporates several factors: the police to population ratio, detachment file count volume, criminal code per member file count, the crime severity index, and the specific needs of the community is how we determine if we need to add other positions to our detachment. So as it stands right now, our projected resource request within the multi-year financial plan is 1 regular member in 2025, along with a police clerk, and then 1 regular member for 2027. This is mainly due to the anticipated population growth within the city. These resource requests will be vetted by administration and will come before council as the budget request for 2025. So the RCMP has forecasted that the per member cost for fiscal year 2024-2025 to be $216,979 per member. This cost includes the regular member pay and benefits, O&M costs, which includes some important equipment modernization, capital costs including the RCMP fleet, then indirect costs such as cadet training and recruiting, human resources, financial services, and overall management of the RCMP. These indirect costs is one of the driving factors to the new member per rate that you're seeing for 2024. Within the multi-year financial plan, you'll see a breakdown of the anticipated equipment upgrades scheduled over the next 4 years. Some of these are the body-worn cameras, pistol modernization. All these costs for the equipment modernization is included in the per member cost. And how I like to describe it is it's a la carte versus all-inclusive. So all-inclusive, you're getting a per member cost, the pistols, the new tasers, all that stuff will be included. If it was a la carte, we'd be coming back multiple times throughout the year and saying, I want potatoes with my steak and I want some corn with my steak. So this way it's all being done through the per member cost.
The RCMP financial plan is based in fiscal year from April 1st to March the 31st, and we do a calculation that accounts for our 2024 calendar year. This includes 1/4 of the 23-24 fiscal rate and 3/4 of the 24-25 fiscal year rate. Based on the quarter 1 multi-year financial plan, $6.2 million is needed for 2024. The city's current budget is set at $5.2 million, and we will need to add approximately $985,000 to our 2024 budget. This increase is driven by inflation, an increased pay estimate of 3.5%, rising operation and maintenance costs, and an increase to the indirect costs of the RCMP. We are also changing the vacancy rate to align with our actuals as well. This contract increase will make up part of the Protective Services budget requests for 2024, and Council will be seeing that later this fall. This concludes our presentation, and Inspector LaRocque and I are happy to answer any questions of Council.
Great. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'll open it up for clarifying questions. Councillor Kelly, go ahead.
Thank you both for today's presentation. I'm not surprised by the cost increases. I've been expecting them, personally at least. But I do have, and I touched base with Corinne just outside City Hall when we were walking in, Inspector. I'm certain I've seen reports from in prior years that talked about a vacancy rate that approached 25%. And I know that because at that time I was always somewhat alarmed with that percentage. It seemed very high, and it happened more than one time. And the report, if I understand today correctly, says on average a 15% vacancy rate for whatever cause in total. Is it possible, and I'm just for your calculation, that the 15% is after allowing for or reducing the actual by the 2 surplus positions that were given? So is it a net vacancy rate or is it a gross? Does that make sense? Does my question make sense? So I'm looking for the reason for the difference between the 25 and the 15.
The easiest answer to that is we're getting people who want to come back to work in our detachment.
Well, that would be marvelous. And I'm not suggesting there was anything
Nope.
wrong, but 25% always seemed very high to me, and it was a concern. If in fact it's getting lower, that's marvelous. If it never was 25%, that's marvelous as well. And but you're comfortable with your numbers at where they stand now at around 15. And I think I heard you comment that you're adjusting your budgeting to reflect actual vacancies. So
I guess the answer to your first question, am I comfortable with my numbers? Yeah.
Okay.
I have a board in my office that I have all the positions there, and I look at it multiple times throughout the day. And our numbers of soft vacancies, so the maternities, the paternities, the off sick, the graduated return to work, they have diminished significantly in the time that I've been here. And I think it's partly due to because how we manage them. And I think there's been more accountability placed on the members and with our systems within the RCMP to get our people back to work quicker, as opposed to them being off for longer extended period of time.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Councillor Blizzard.
Thanks for your presentation, and I also want to say congratulations on 150 years. I was at the celebration. It was very well done, and thanks for all that you do. So just one question. It says in there you have about 4.5 full-time equivalent per year vacancies, but you only have 2 extras. So how do you fill the other 2.5, or is that an issue?
So the 4.5 vacancy, that's a number that's taken throughout the year, right?
Yes.
So again, we could sometimes have 6, then sometimes we could have 2. So that's the average one. With the extra bodies, we're not getting any extra bodies to fill those vacancies. So the RCMP are not providing any more bodies to do that. So what it is we're managing those vacancies through our resources internally within the detachment. So if we are in need of bodies, we'll take some from the general investigation section. So the plainclothes members that are investigating frauds and some person crime and thing of that sort. And for a determinate amount of time, we'll bring them out and into the general duty work to cover those costs, because the calls for service never stop. Right, so those will come throughout the year. So it's that internal management that myself and my management team within the detachment will do to mitigate any risks by those vacancies not being there. So and so this far, when I first arrived last year, we were incurring a significant amount of overtime last year to fill watches because the numbers of vacancies were so low. This year, and we're just getting through the summer months. Up until just recently, we were we weren't differently staffed, but we managed it differently. So we did things like move shifts around. So if one watch, like the day shift watch had extra people, we would push them to the night shift. And then throughout the days, I reduced the minimums amount, because if you see our office on any given day between myself, my management team, and the rest of the plainclothes members, we have another 10 or 12 police officers sitting around that are more than capable to go out and take a call and help out. So we had different strategies to try and mitigate those vacancies, to try and ensure that the service delivery didn't drop below any below standards.
Okay, so the 2 is adequate, you're saying? You don't need a third person as an extra.
So I can tell you that the practice of having STE positions in a detachment to cover off the vacancies is being ceased, because eventually what could happen is if you had the extra bodies there and on Tuesday everyone came back to work, well, then we would be surplus on the budget side because we were paying them. So they're no longer doing that anymore. So the expectation is that you will manage it within your own detachment resources. And if the issues became so dire, then we would go either to the district or surrounding detachments to bring in other bodies to help out on a short-term basis to fill those needs.
So that's in years going forward. Do you anticipate that here too, that you won't have those STEs?
I anticipate that when if we go to fill those the new positions, the one in 2025 and then the one in 2027, we will probably then go from 2 STE to 1 STE to maybe no STEs.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nguyen.
Very well thought out HR plan. I'm not sure if I'm more confused or there's clarity after that, but I think I got the gist of it. You've obviously done some diligent work in management and implementation of our detachment since you've been here in Fort Saskatchewan. I have a question just about the equipment, modernization of intervention equipment in the detachment, as it's a significant portion of the budget increase. Has the demand for this type of inventory been pulled from situations locally that have required this, or is this kind of a like a federal, like a general package? And I think you alluded to it in your presentation that you put together of where policing is going and the new equipment needed for that.
With regards to the pistol modernization, that is an RCMP standard. So our pistol is the better part of about 25 years old, and Smith & Wesson, the manufacturer, don't even service it anymore. So basically, we service our own pistols in-house with the RCMP out of our armories in Regina. The new pistols are going to have some attachments to it with a flashlight attached to it and a different sighting system. So again, that's the evolution of police weapons moving forward. So it's not a local detachment need that has been identified. It's a national thing from the RCMP in general.
Okay, excellent. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I'm next. Question. So you're saying for 2025, you want one additional officer and one additional clerk. How long does it take to get the officer? Because I have a pretty good idea. So how many months are we looking at?
So I believe we'll be coming before council again when we do our work here this fall, and asking for it early 2024 for delivery, hopefully in 2025.
So basically then you're looking in the 2024 budget for pre-approval for 2025 so that you can go out and start the hiring in 2024 so that you know you'll have it?
That's kind of what we're doing. It takes a while to get people through the system.
Okay.
Sorry.
Go
Your
ahead.
Worship, if I can just hop in there. So that will be a budget request for the 2025 calendar year. So later in the fall of 2024, we will come forward with that budget possible request for 2025. Then it can take several months for an officer to arrive within that year of 2025.
Okay, so I'm going to go to Mr. Fleming because if they're not asking till the fall of 2024, we know that they're not going to get one till the fall of 2025. So as per my question, would we not consider doing like a pre-approval saying we're going to pre-approve this, it'll be just dedicated for 2025?
Yeah, through your worship, I think you're referring to this is a past practice for us where we've actually asked for the officer almost a year in advance before we wanted it to arrive. And I will take that back and discuss it with the team because it is a good strategy. If the genuine idea is to have it in at the start of the 2025 budget year, we certainly shouldn't wait until the fall of 2024. So I'll discuss that with the team and we can bring it back to council for consideration.
Okay, and it's not so much putting the money in as it's saying asking council for the commitment for 2025. So, going into it, if we approve it, then it's already approved.
Yeah, through your worship, that's correct. And I believe since I've been here, we've done it at least twice before. Yep.
Right. Okay. Second question, these indirect costs, all of a sudden 200,000 more for indirect costs. So that's the federal government's indirect costs? Like, what are these indirect costs?
So the indirect cost is a culmination of all the things that it costs to run a policing service. So a lot of our financial stuff is done by people outside of this detachment. Our cadet recruiting, all those type of things, running the program. So it's cost that is used by the RCMP proper that is then dissipated out to all their contracts is I think the best way to describe that. So it's Green?
Through to your worship. So yes, the indirect div admin costs are all of those management wages that we pay as well for those things. So those have seen pay increases. So it is the running of the RCMP, recruitment, cadet training, and all of those types of indirect costs. There is also another calculation that happens with all of those that are on special leave over the 30 days. That does come back as an indirect cost to detachments, to the municipalities at a lower rate. So we don't pay the full cost of those individuals being on special leave. However, that is part of that calculation and those costs as well. And we are seeing that is one of the main drivers of our increases is the indirect costs.
Okay, and I guess with that, so the federal government would be picking up part of the tab right now on these indirect costs, I assume, and spreading them all across Canada or whoever has our CMP. So is this more of a download to the municipalities?
Through to your worship, I would say it's definitely as K Division and the management and different those internal workings, those departments and divisions grow, then that does increase the costs downloaded to municipalities as well. So for those specialized sections within K Division, we are paying for that portion of those things that are growing within K Division, and the municipality pays a portion of that cost.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. Councillor Harris, you were on there. You're not anymore. Okay, I'll go to Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. I found the discussion and your response to Councillor Noyan's questions on the pistols interesting. So can we have the same sort of discussion on the body cameras? Is that a national move on or march out, or is it a local? What's your personal feeling, if you would like to share, on the wearing of body cameras? Any comments would be appreciated. I've done some reading. I'm not sure where I stand on them. So any comments you might have would be appreciated.
In terms of the rollout of the body cameras, it's an RCMP initiative nationwide that all of the general duty police officers to start with will be wearing body cameras. That is going across different police services across Canada and into the United States and internationally. So it's becoming, again, another accepted tool that policing is using in general to capture what is happening in interactions between the public and police officers. So it's a national thing that the RCMP are doing. So it's not, again, it's not a Barry LaRock didn't say, hey, I want 40 body-worn cameras. It's a national initiative that's being undertaken there. In terms of body cameras themselves, there's going to be a considerable amount of work. The one clerk position that I mentioned for 2025, again, we're looking forward and anticipating that the data and video that will be captured by the body-worn cameras, and then having to move the data along from getting downloaded, or I should say uploaded into a cloud within the detachment, to then all of a sudden deciding that it's part of a disclosure, and then moving that in whatever acceptable format over to disclosure, to get it over to the clerk or the court detail, to get it over to the Crown. All that kind of stuff there is going to be probably, and we're anticipating that it's going to require some extra dedicated resource, and probably some with a different skill than maybe what we might have, even though we deal with it right now with the watch guard systems in our cars. So, yeah, it's going to be an issue. Then we look at privacy issues, right? When all of a sudden we're standing talking to someone, and then someone's talking in the background, and then someone's face goes by. There's a lot of big issues that are going to become part of the video, dealing with all that video and moving it through the system. I think it's going to be beneficial to us in the case of public complaints, where we get people come forward and said, oh, that police officer said I was a XYZ, right? If the body camera is running and it's working properly and it's not too cold because coming from the Northwest Territories, I know that that's going to be one of the issues. It should be easily look at the video. The interaction was not as it was presented. So I think that there's going to be some benefit there. I think it is like anything, when someone knows they're recorded, they probably will modify their behaviors to an acceptable standard. So I think there'll probably be some benefit to police officers as well to modify their behavior, knowing full well that it is not only on every cell phone that's standing nearby, it is now on a police capturing video device. And as far as Barry's personal views on it, is I have no views. I think that in the broader scheme of policing, I think it has benefit. I think there are some drawbacks as well. But I think ultimately it will be beneficial to us and to the public at general.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. I agree. I think it's personal protective equipment. It benefits both sides of that equation, and let's wait and see how it unfolds in the next few years. But I look forward to it. Thank you again.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Macon.
Thank you. I was just curious what the time frame is on the body camera. I imagine when you're rolling out a federal program and supply chain being what it is now, and when the whole country wants to go to wearing body cameras, is actually getting the cameras an issue? Like, what is the time frame for getting this rolled out for us?
So currently there is some pilots being run in St. Paul, in Parkland, so that's Stony Plain and
Spruce Grove.
Spruce Grove, and I believe maybe Red Deer are running pilots right now. So it's how to work out all the kinks and stuff. It is anticipated to be coming to us in 2024. I hope that is going to. I believe we'll get the cameras sometime in 2024. But then it's all that backside stuff that I've talked about already, where I think there's going to be some linchpins that it's going to cause some issues. But yes, we're anticipating it. It's being budgeted for 2024 right now.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. It looks like all of the questions, so I'll just close with saying thank you very much for your service. Thank you very much for having as many members out as you did to celebrate the 150th. It was so nice to see that many people come out, and I think there was a lot of families involved as well that showed up. Excellent pictures. And yeah, and just want to say we're very fortunate here that we seem to be able to get this information on budgeting in advance. And there's a lot of municipalities that I listen to that say they don't hear about it until April of the following year, and they have concerns with that, and then they can't get it in their budgets and so on. So I think we are very fortunate that you're keeping your eye on what's going on and being able to inform us and give us the opportunity that we can make our adjustment early. So thank you very much for all you do. Thank you. Do everybody want a 5-minute break, a little break? Yeah, let's take a, what is it, 3:05? Let's take a 10-minute break here till 3:15. So we'll recess till 3:15. Okay, we will resume the September 19th Committee of the Whole. The next item that we have is cemetery fees and charges discussion. Richard Gagnon.
Thank you, Chair and members of Council. Good afternoon. My name is Richard Gagnon. I'm the Public Works Director, and with me today, Janelle Hart, Parks Manager. We're here today to present and to discuss with Council an administrative report addressing consideration when setting fees and charges at the Fort Saskatchewan Cemetery. During the 2023 budget deliberations, Council unanimously approved the following motion: that Council direct administration to return to Council in 2023 with a report providing additional consideration and analysis on the user fees and charges for the Fort Saskatchewan Cemetery. So this was done during our last budget discussions. On April 11, 2023, Council approved changes to the fees and charges policy, FIN 009C. This policy establishes and collects user fees and charges in exchange for goods and services offered in the community. This is an important policy as it sets the tone, the principles, and the guideline for administration to follow when setting fees and charges. So this update was important for us. In a sense, the policy is the main source of considerations when we develop our report that we have in the appendix, and when we review the fees and charges at the Fort Saskatchewan Cemetery in preparation to the upcoming budget. So when a policy is updated by Council, then normally administration will follow and do the update on the procedures associated with the policy. So we need to update that. So this is what we did. The current administrative procedures for establishing the fees and charges at the cemetery were updated to better align with the new Council policy approved in April 2023. The document provides details on how administration sets fees and charges, and the new procedures can be found in Appendix 2 of your administrative report if you want to see more details on this. But saying that, some highlights. Some of the updates include, for example, when applicable, fees and charges shall recover direct and indirect costs associated with the service provided. Direct costs are basically the costs we see at the departmental level, where indirect costs are mainly associated with governance overhead associated with mainly corporate services program. So the indirect costs, this isn't something new for us, that we basically included into the analysis that you see in the report. Under the benefit received principles, cemetery fees and charges aim to recover 100% of direct and indirect costs of the cemetery programs and also contribute to the perpetual care reserve. There is also a recognition that cemetery fees associated with infant plot, field of honor, and the field of honor, it's basically the area that is exclusive for the RCMP and the Legion. And also provincial programs for low-income and unclaimed body have a benefit to the community, and a rebate is deemed appropriate for compassion, community pride, or necessary as per the Cemetery Act. The attached report provides a high-level revenue and cost analysis using data from the 2023 Priority-Based Budgeting Program. The total revenue is reported at $129,004, while direct and indirect costs total $173,824. So this represents about an 80% cost recovery and a revenue shortfall of $34,819 if we try to recover all direct and indirect costs. So in our pricing methodology and strategy, we propose that cemetery fees and charges should therefore consider an average increase of 5% over the next 5 years to recover this revenue shortfall and achieve full cost recovery. We did some analysis with our comparators, and a regional market analysis of municipal comparators were completed in the spring of 2023. Our comparators include the City of Leduc, Camrose, Spruce Grove, and St. Albert. Overall, we saw that basically 46% of our Fort Saskatchewan cemetery fees are within the market, and 18% are considered maybe lower than market, and then 36% are above market. So what we found is for the plots and the sales of the goods, we're very close to the market, within about 15% of the average. Where we are a little bit more expensive than our comparators is when we provide services to open and close, and also overtime. In our report, we also look at inflation. Consideration for inflation includes a wage increase. Now that we have a collective agreement in place where we can see the next wages over the next few years, then we can consider that. New equipment allocation fee schedule, as well as some specific items for inflationary increase when it's deemed appropriate. For example, if we rent a piece of equipment to do some work, then there could be inflation attached to that. So as our pricing methodology, we integrated the cost of inflation into the fees and charges for cemetery fees, cemetery services, and these normally includes opening or closing graves, niches, issuing permits, registration, deed, just to name a few. These are the things that we have staff doing that we normally can look at inflation and wages at the same time. So this analysis should be done on a yearly basis. Part of our strategy when we look at the fees and charges is also to look at inventory. So what we found is basically some trends on the inventory, especially for the niches. We know that our bottom row niches inventory is about 28% greater than the upper row niches inventory. If you ask, I mean, we see that pretty much in every single municipality. Upper rows are more popular than lower rows. It's a fact. The current 2023 sales also of upper row niches still doubles the sales of those located on the bottom row niches. So even if we did some adjustment last year, we still see that the upper rows are more in demand. So as a pricing strategy to balance inventory within a columbarium unit, we have special consideration is proposed to help the sales of bottom row niches. So in principle, the price of the upper row niches should be higher than the price of a lower row niches, because especially they're more popular. So bottom row niches fees should remain at the 2023 rate. This is what we looked at. And increase also the cost of the upper row niches by about 7% to meet the overall revenue target that we have. So the fee difference between the bottom row niches and the upper row niches is about $676. So we hope this consideration will be an incentive to buyers to select a bottom row niche, and this strategy can at any time be adjusted in the future as the inventory balance is achieved. The city maintains a perpetual care reserve to fund maintenance and capital costs to sustain the development and develop the cemetery in perpetuity. The perpetual care reserve aims at creating an ongoing bank gains interest to maintain the cemetery in perpetuity, as well as fund some capital projects. As of June 30th, 2023, the perpetual care reserve uncommitted balance is $537,480. It is projected that the reserve could reach about $912,500 when the current cemetery site is at full capacity. This is the site that we have now, not including any expansions. It is projected that annual revenue generated by interest on the projected balance can sustain the maintenance and the repairs of the current site in perpetuity when the cemetery is at full capacity. So you use this capital, this amount of money, and you invest and receive interest, and the interest pays for your maintenance. So this is possible. Small capital projects such as columbarium shall remain funded through the Perpetual Care Reserve, as the fees and charges for each niche almost double the cost of the investment back into the reserve. So if it's a good way to invest and to improve your reserve. It is suggested that major long-term capital projects be funded through debt or self-financing initiative, another reserve in a sense, where associated direct costs could strategically be integrated into the fees and charges of the cemetery. So in conclusion, we are proposing an average of increase of about 5% to fees and charges over the next 5 years to recover the revenue shortfall as well as inflation. This 5-year approach is a progressive increase to cemetery fees and charges while allowing staff to monitor trends, sales trends, compare prices, costs, and annual inflation rate. The proposed 2024 cemetery rates are available in the Appendix 4 of the Fees and Charges report for your information, and especially in the spirit of showing Council the effect of this report on the upcoming fees and charges adjustment at the cemetery you'll see in the future. We understand that Council will provide comments and feedback as part of this discussion today, which could also affect the consideration in future rates. We recognize that. This concludes my presentation, and Jenna and I are here to answer your question or to engage in your discussion.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. Councillor Harris, you're first.
Thanks, Richard. I've heard a couple of times from people that have had to incur overtime charges to do an opening or a closing outside of normal business hours. Talk to me about that, because they seem to feel, and it was only 2 instances, 2 individual family members were concerned about having to do that, or they had to change the. Anyways, what's your thought on that in relation to? So, what's considered to be normal business hours? 8 to 5.
And I think we refer to the fees to the cemetery our bylaw that basically define when I believe the overcharge is in place, and I believe it's after 3:30. And basically it takes a certain amount of time to prepare and to get the site ready. So what we're trying to do as much as possible when the ladies, our clerks at the public works are dealing with clients, is to avoid that as much as possible, and to see how we can accommodate that in a way that we don't have any surcharge on overtime. Saying that, sometimes these situations happen, and then the timing of the event is more important. So, but normally it's after 3:30. I believe this is where we start. Janelle, if you want to.
Yeah, through your chair, just to Councillor Harris. So yes, it's absolutely correct, and we do look at that 8 to 5 kind of operational hours. And so if we are looking at a later start for a service, it can push our employees into working overtime hours because they've started so early in the morning.
Okay, fair enough. Second question. It's been a long time since I've looked at a columbarium, and so obviously there are several. How high is a typical columbarium in terms of niches? 4, 5, 6?
Your Worship, to Councillor Harris, 4 rows.
Have we ever thought about a long columbarium that goes on forever, just 2 high? So ultimately they're all close to the top. Have you ever thought about that? And I say that just tongue in cheek. I know it's a challenge, and ultimately I think you're trying to address it in an innovative way to try to make it appropriate for people that are cost conscious. Is that fair to say?
Your Worship, to Councillor Harris, this is an option for someone to get maybe a niche at a lower cost using a lower row with the strategy that we have. But really what we're trying to do also is to make sure that we sell the inventory. Yeah. So we don't only have lower row to offer.
Well, I'm glad to see you're looking at it from that standpoint too, because I think we have to be innovative when we sell a service or sell a product. So that's good. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Macon.
just have a kind of a random question. So I can right now go and buy a plot or a niche for myself, and if I keep walking to council meetings, maybe I won't need it for another 60 years. Is the price that I'm paying today, is that it? Like I can pay whatever the price is for my niche, and even though I don't use it for 60 years or need it, that's it? I've already prepaid and I'm committed to that.
To the chair, to Councillor Macon, where you will pay the cost of that is in the fees and charges. So this is your fee that you paid that year.
Now,
Yeah.
and then it doesn't change and you don't need to pay anything else later.
That's correct.
Okay, just curious.
The only thing that may change is the cost of servicing. So when it's time to do the interment or to open and to service the event, they may be changed at the cost of services. But the cost of the plot, the rights to access the plot, that's the right that you're purchasing, or the cost of the right to access the niche will not change.
Okay.
Right. And sorry, just to add to that, through your chair to Councillor Macon, people are sometimes encouraged or ask if they can purchase as they're purchasing the plot or the niche at that time to prepay for the open and close. And then that way there is no future increased costs.
So they can even pay for that service, even though it could be 3 times the price. Okay. Is there different styles of niches that could be purchased in the future that kind of eliminate the issue between irregularities of wanting one over the other, or that it's a basic design?
Your worship, to Councillor Macon, and it's just from what I've seen in also other communities, it's different design of niches and columbarium that can be looked at. But these are not basically designed in a way that they all belong in one row. They all basically you're looking for density in a sense.
Okay.
Yeah. And there will always be an upper row and a lower row from what I've seen so far in designs.
Okay.
There's other things that exist as well we can look at in the future, but normally what you see is for a columbarium is several rows, either one, two. One, you don't see that too often unless it's used as a bench that complement an entire development of columbarium around.
Right.
How
many rows do we have?
4.
4. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Actually next in the order, and so the question that I have, okay, so when we talk about all of the costs, you talk about direct and indirect costs, and I'm not going to talk about the columbariums and that because that's supposed to pay for itself. But actually there is one question on there. In your report it says the upper ones are 43% premium for the upper row niches. And you just said it was 7% difference from the bottom to the top. But in your report you say it's a 43% premium of $676. So
Your worship, my comment, the 7% was on the increase to the 2023 to 2024 rate of the upper row. So we did a 7% increase there. But the difference is $670 something.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. So then
between the two. So basically a 7% is the proposed increase for 2024 for the upper row and a 0% increase for the lower row.
Okay.
To help too.
Okay. And then the next one, what do we charge for a plot? Like it used to be $300 for Infinity, and then I think that's gone up. And I guess I asked that question because this cemetery goes back to the late 1800s when that land really had very little value. And I understand the value of land now is more, but if you're trying to equate the cost of a plot for what the cost of the land was, how are you making that fair and equitable?
Your worship, the current 2023 fees and charges basically states that the full-size plot, which is the 4x9, is $1,200 $1,205.
$1,205.
This is the current fees and charges.
Okay, so that's where I'm coming back to my question. This land was there in the late 1800s, and forever and ever, the cost was $300. And then all of a sudden, I understand the city council has increased the fee to $1,200. But why? So to me, that's inequitable, because you know, if we have to get a new cemetery at some point in time, I can understand if we have to buy that land and debenture it or something, those fees and charges should be allocated to a plot. But I'm still struggling with the fact that now all of a sudden we're saying, well, we're just arbitrarily increasing the cost of these plots. And I know when I left in 2007, they were still $300 and had been that way for years. So how do we justify that?
Your Worship, the justification I will see, and then again, this is for us. It's there's an aspect of a perpetual care reserve that I think can provide you with some level of justification. If we're looking at building a perpetual care reserve and have enough fund to basically meet the strategy, which is basically to invest the money that we have in the fund, and from that money invest it and use it for maintenance. I'll give you an example, and I'll use very round numbers on this one. Let's say you have a perpetual care reserve that achieves $1 million, and you no longer sell anything. The cemetery is closed, we only maintain it. You invest the $1 million at 2.5%. This is $25,000 a year. That can be used to maintain that. So I think that the strategy of increasing the fee is one of them. There's also the market as another strategy. When you look at our comparators, they are also, we're very close to them in terms of fees and charges for the plot. So some other communities that we visited, some of them maintain very low costs, but it's a decision that they made this way. On our side, our strategy is to look at the market and what the balance is for the perpetual care reserve, so we can achieve the goal of maintaining this forever.
Okay, I have a whole lot of comments on that, but I'm going to let somebody go on and then I'll come back. Okay, Councillor Kelly, go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you folks for being here today. I've got several questions. I might require, in fact, I'm sure I'll need 2 turns at this, Mayor Katcher, but I want to follow up on the discussion that you've started. The concept is foreign to me, and I know it's society that we live in accepts it as gospel, but to me it's completely foreign. You live in this world for 70 to 80 years if you're lucky, and because of that you should be entitled to a 4x9 piece of the earth for perpetuity. I don't know how we're supposed to support that. There's societies within North America, not societies, but cities, municipalities, counties within North America that flat out don't do it anymore. To put that into perspective, the current population of Canada is about 28 million. And if every resident of Canada got their 4x9 plot, we can expect to consume in Canada more than 36 square miles of real estate for cemeteries within the next 75 years. And that's not real estate out in the boondocks someplace that is unusable. That's real estate in the urban scenario or agricultural land, which has significant value for future generations. So there's a discussion that I think we should have as a council around those concepts. I think we should be promoting the columbarium approach, not offering the plot at a discount to the columbarium, but in fact the plot, because it's 4x9, costs exactly 30 times more, because it's way bigger. It's 36 square feet in size as opposed to 1 or 2 square feet in size. Now, That's a, Mayor Katcher, I'm prepared to quit right now, or I can go on to another question or at least another comment if you'll allow me. Up to you.
Just do one more and then I'll put you on round 2.
Yeah, you bet. I'm having trouble, folks, understanding the revenue stream and the reserve stream. When I look at Appendix 1 in our materials, plot sales, columbarium sales, monument foundation sales, those revenues go to the reserve.
Your worship, to Councillor Kelly, that's correct. All
And
revenue. Yep.
On our operating statement, we still have $139,000 of annual revenue reported. What's in that what is that 139,000 comprised of? It's obviously not those items.
So it is part of it. It's the 120. Let me just look at the. Let me bring the slide here. I think that would be easier. There we go. So the revenue that we record, $139,000, include the sales of the plots and the niches and the monument foundation. That includes also the services for us to open and close, and it is also a transfer from reserve to pay for when we have a project. For example, if we add a concrete runner actually to this. So a transfer to reserve, sales of goods, and sales of services, and there's a little bit of revenue coming from permits as well.
Okay, so maybe then the direct cost on your slide of roughly $150,000 per annum, that includes an allocation to the reserve?
That's right.
Okay, there's there's the missing link, because I'm looking at it as a revenue stream, and I couldn't imagine we were generating $200,000 out of the cemetery every year. So,
Your worship, Councillor Kelly, the reserve is shown as an expense.
The reserve is shown as an expense. Thank you. That clears that up. I'm going to flag myself as soon as I'm off here. Thanks, Mayor Katcher.
I'm keeping a running list.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Nguyen.
Yeah, thanks. Just for clarification, I was reading the field of honor, so that's reserved for service individuals. So that is basically subsidized by the city in exchange for caretaking by the RCMP and the Legion, I think, and so that's how it works. There's no financial contribution from those organizations.
Your worship, to Councillor Nguyen, just to clarify the field of honor, and I'll use the RCMP for example. The RCMP has the right to the plots at no fee. And for a member or a family of the member, but they still pay for the service to open or close either the plot or the niche in a sense. And the RCMP in the contract that we have with them will pay every year $500 toward the perpetual care reserve. It's very similar for the Legion as well.
Okay, excellent. Thanks for clearing that up. There wasn't that much detail in the report. When looking at comparables, I'm just curious how privately run cemeteries stack up to municipal cemeteries. It looks like in the area, Leduc, Spruce Grove, and St. Albert, there were quite a few different policies, procedures in place for setting user fees. So considering that those municipalities don't have the same rubric as we do for setting fees, how do we compare to private cemeteries, or is that something that you've looked into at all?
Yeah. Your worship, to Councillor Nguyen, the policy that we follow basically define the comparators as municipalities,
right?
And that's why we basically look at the four that we have that have similar size in in population. Now we did, and what we found when we talked to municipalities and we visited them, everybody has different ways of setting their fees and charges. We don't have the same policy in every single municipality. That's a fact. And to find in a region, let's say a cemetery that has kind of a similar philosophy that we have here in this fees and charges and our procedures, I was able to find one, which was Rose Hill in Edmonton. And then when I look at their nonprofit group, they're not, this is not a for-profit company, this is a nonprofit, but they are stating on their website that they are at full cost recovery. So when I look at their fees that was posted on their website, the cost of niches and plots much higher than ours. I will say close to double of what we see, but our services in terms of opening, closing, and things we're very close for that.
Interesting to note. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Macon.
Thank you. Probably actually a question for Mr. Fleming. I don't really have any more questions about what's here today, but there seems to be some general questions around the cemetery. I thought that you had mentioned in passing that the cemetery master plan was expected back, I want to say, in the next year. Do you recall when we're seeing that again?
Through your worship, I thought the cemetery master plan was completed a few years ago. Mr. Gagnon can confirm, but the work is done. Council received it. It's on the city's website.
Yeah, I remember that. I do recall that we did that. I just thought that something else was coming back with the expansion, right? Because we're headed towards those other pieces.
Yeah, Your Worship, to Councillor Macon, we had several discussions on the matter as we are preparing the budget, especially the capital budget as well. And 2017 is when the cemetery master plan was developed. Mm-hmm. And as we're approaching, I believe, 2027 for potential expansion of the cemetery, we want to look at updating some of the data that we have in the cemetery master plan. Okay. And I think we're going to do that as we are heading into the new development that we will be proposing there. Okay.
So maybe around the end of 2025 then-ish?
I believe it will be in the 2026, 2027 as we're designing the new the expansion if it's a project council wish to pursue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm next in the order. So the cost of living is going up and up and up. So it's the cost of dying now. And I just wonder if people can actually afford to die anymore. So I'm being a little facetious on that. And I'm coming back to that because I understand you live on this earth for 70, 80, 90, 100 years, then all of a sudden you've outlived all your family and you don't have maybe the financial means. So now you become indigent. Or those who are indigent just get theirs paid for. So maybe they're the lucky ones. I guess where I'm coming from is we're not advancing. People don't require a 7x9 plot, and I know we've made good advancements to have a 6 foot or a 9 foot, a 6 foot, and 5 cremations on top. So we actually have 5 people that are buried in a 7x9, and in a 4x4 you can have multiples as well based on depth. But I think as the cost continues to go up, if we don't put in a scattering garden, I think we're doing a disservice to the people who want to have a memory to be able to go and sit and maybe remember their loved ones where they've scattered the ashes as opposed to putting them into a columbarium or burying them in the ground. And more people I talk to are holding on to ashes because A, they don't know what to do with them. They can't afford or they can't afford to have them put into the cemetery. And I think if we're going to have a municipal cemetery, we have to provide something that's an affordable option. and to me, a scattering, Gibbons does great. They've got a scattering garden, they've got the memorial wall that, yeah, you pay a little portion of the wall, but then you get a plaque that goes on there so people can go sit there and remember their loved ones. Yeah, if we're just going to make the costs go up, then we're only going to make it affordable for rich people and the very poor to be able to get buried. So I'm just saying you need to have that opportunity for everyone. And I just struggle with this continuously. And I know we talk about indirect costs. Well, we did that with utilities too. We could just move more of management positions into utilities. Same thing. So we just take a little more and we just keep pushing it over just to creep those prices up. So those are my comments, and we get to say those here. They're not directed at you two. Don't take it personal. It's a direction that we have to figure out as a council, but there has to be an affordable option to get buried. Otherwise, everybody's just throwing their ashes somewhere in the community. Mr. Fleming.
Yeah. Just, Your Worship, Mr. Gagnon can confirm, but I believe we've already developed a plan request for the budget for 2024 that includes a scattering garden.
Okay, we haven't seen that yet.
Yeah. It's been developed for the upcoming budget deliberations.
Okay, so we'll see something. Okay, I've got Councillor Kelly. Were you still on there? And then Councillor Harris. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I thought Councillor Harris was up. Mayor Katcher, I support the concept of a scattering garden. It should be incredibly expensive to have your 4x9 piece of property on Earth forever. In fact, that cost should be insurmountable, so it ought not to happen. I'd like to touch on Councillor Harris's question around the overtime. And a general comment, Richard, I wholeheartedly support the variable pricing stuff that you're getting into. If in fact it's deemed better to have a penthouse as a bottle of ashes as opposed to the basement suite as a bottle of ashes, we should charge more for the penthouse suite so that we can sell the bottom suites. The overtime, it's an increased level of service. It costs the city more, and it's a nuisance to the employees because they also work a full day before they go over there in the afternoon or the evening or the weekend to do that work. It's worth it. So the only comment I have there is that we should make that policy abundantly clear to the other service providers in town, the churches or the funeral homes that are arranging these funerals, so that they can advise their customers that in fact, if you plan this way, this is the cost, and if you plan this way, this is the cost. Up to you. Mm-hmm. You make the decision ahead of time, and it's no longer the city of Fort Saskatchewan's problem. Comparators. I appreciated Councillor Nguyen's question. Maybe when we're talking swimming pool, we compare ourselves to other municipalities with a swimming pool and not a hotel someplace. But when we're talking something as fundamentally basic as a burial plot, I think we compare ourselves to the market. And the market isn't just the municipalities. So I'll leave that on the table. One last comment, Mayor Katcher, I'm dragging on a bit here, but the reserve if it reaches the approximately 900,000 that you forecast, Richard, that's great. But it's a perpetual reserve, by the way. And as we've just seen, inflation can creep in insidious ways. And while the budget might only be today $23,000 to maintain that plot of land per annum, it's not unforeseen that within 10 or 15 years that budget cost could be $50,000 or $60,000, could easily be. So I think if we're planning for a reserve, which we should be, to last into perpetuity, and that's what we're saying we're doing, that we ought to really do a present value calculation and build in some rates of inflation into that and bring us back to a present value that accounts for potential inflation increases. I think we would easily find that that reserve should be at least twice as large as the $900,000 that you're forecasting for, and maybe multiples of it, not just double. I'd look forward to that calculation, maybe if we can do it for budget. All of this, of course, driving to the fact that $1,200 for a 4x9 piece of property sounds very expensive, but it's forever. And it has to be expensive. I'm done. Thank you very much for your report.
Thank you. Councillor Harris.
Madam Mayor, in relation to your comments about death and dying and funerals, I have to tell you, I've told Judy, my wife, that I subscribe to the Viking process of burial. And so I have a kayak. And so what I've asked her to do is that when I die, just put me in my kayak, take me down to Turner Park, put me in my kayak, set it on fire and push it out into the North Saskatchewan River and let me float down to the Hudson's Bay. And I'm not sure how the North Saskatchewan Watershed Alliance is going to feel about that, but I hope they're still watching because that may or may not happen. So I just thought I'd throw a little levity in it, but I'm quite serious. That's what I've told her I want to do. I want to be burned like a Viking. So there we go.
Yeah, there might be some bylaw issues there, but...
yeah, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. It'll be interesting through budget times, so thank you for the update. All right, we're going to move right along to Urban Forest Protection and Enhancement Plan. And we have Brianna Kelly. Are you Brianna or are you Camilla? Brenna. Okay.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Committee of the Whole. My name is Brenna Kelly. I'm the Project Coordinator for the Public Works Department and working on the Urban Forest Protection and Enhancement Plan. With me today is Janelle Hart, our Parks Manager and Project Manager for the project. We've also got Richard Gagnon, who's the Director of Public Works and our project sponsor. And we have two consultants with us here virtually today. We have Camille Lefrancois, who's our primary consultant with Diamond Head Consulting. And then we also have Peyton Meters, who's with our Indigenous consulting firm, Pipiquan Petaquan. The purpose of this presentation is to provide the Committee of the Whole with an update on the findings from Phase 1 of the Urban Forest Protection and Enhancement Plan. At the end of my presentation, we'll provide you with an opportunity to ask any questions that you might have. The Urban Forest Protection and Enhancement Plan project was split into two phases. Phase 1 of the plan, which was the information gathering phase, was conducted in the spring and summer of 2023. It included a background review of current urban forest policies and procedures, a technical data analysis on our current tree inventory, and public engagement efforts. Phase 2 of the plan begins this fall and will continue into the first quarter of 2024. It will focus on drafting the plan and will draw on information gathered and synthesized in Phase 1 to inform the plan. We expect the project to be completed in the spring of 2024. And we're here to talk today about what we learned throughout Phase 1 of the project. So the first step of Phase 1 was a review of the city's policies and procedures as they relate to the urban forest. The results of the review were provided to us in the form of a report card, and it provides a snapshot comparison of the city's current urban forest management program and is measured against a set of best management practices, criteria, and indicators. We were ranked on 5 core urban forest services. So they are planning, planting, management, protection, and partnership. The city scored an overall mark of fair, And we scored well in our management practices, and improvements could be made in areas relating to protection. And more detailed information can be found in Appendix A. The second step of Phase 1 was a technical data analysis of our current urban forest inventory. Some interesting information we learned from that is that our citywide tree canopy currently sits at 8%. And so that means that all the land in the city, including industrial, commercial, private, and public land. The area with the most canopy is the Old Fort and downtown areas. The area with the least amount of canopy cover is the Alston lands, which are the industrial and agricultural areas. The newly developed neighborhoods have some of the lowest canopy cover in the city. And we also learned that 74% of the tree population in the city is dominated by just 3 species, which are elm, ash, and spruce. And more highlights from the data analysis can be found in Appendix B. The next part of Phase 1 was our public engagement phase. So engagement with stakeholders, industry, the public, and Indigenous communities occurred between May and August of 2023. Results from public engagement sessions will help to inform the vision, principles, and goals of the Urban Forest Plan. Public engagement events were marketed through the Forest Feels media campaign. And the engagement activities included 2 open house in-person events. We had 2 stakeholder workshops, an online survey and a mapping tool, a webinar, and pop-up visits and booths at recreation centers and parks around the city. And we received feedback from over 575 people through online engagement tools and an additional 50 individuals in person. Through these engagement efforts, some of the things that we heard are a vast majority of respondents think that trees and forests are very important. We also heard that many respondents value the health and wellness benefits that forests provide. Most respondents believe the most pressing challenge to urban forests is development and land use changes. And another big theme we heard was that there is a need for better balance between protection and recreation in our urban forests. And there's also a need for more public education about urban forests. And more detailed information about our public engagement efforts can be found in Appendix C. Indigenous engagement was led by consulting firm Pibiquan Petaquan and was supported by city administration. Engagement sessions kicked off with a pipe ceremony, then focused on meeting with elders, knowledge keepers, Indigenous community members of Fort Saskatchewan and surrounding areas, Indigenous organizations, and Indigenous environmental scientists. These engagement sessions were facilitated through a method of engagement called Kiyu Kewin, or the Visiting Way, and it aims to build lasting relationships through trust and reciprocity. A total of 83 participants were engaged through these sessions, with most taking place in person and some virtually. Engagement sessions aim to identify Indigenous community members' vision for the urban forest, to identify important Indigenous history and culturally significant areas, to collect traditional ecological knowledge to help inform the plan, and to build relationships with Indigenous communities. A few highlights from what we heard through the Indigenous engagement include learning about the history and relationship between Indigenous peoples and birch trees that were once found in abundance in the area. We heard about the importance of Turner Park as a place to gather and harvest medicines, as well as its association with Indigenous and Métis history through Joseph Turner. The identification of forest protection as a core objective of the plan. We also heard that traditional and sacred medicines were once found in abundance in the area and are either absent or rare today. We heard concerns over land erosion and damage along trail systems. We heard about a desire for the city to incorporate food forestry practices in our services. And a need was identified for more public education efforts surrounding topics like Indigenous history and knowledge, weeds, biodiversity, and the importance of plants. And more detailed information about Indigenous engagement can be found in Appendix D. Indigenous engagement remains ongoing as we learn more about Indigenous people's relationship and history with the land that we're on today. So what we learned from Phase 1 will inform the development of the Urban Forest Protection and Enhancement Plan that's scheduled in Phase 2. As we head into Phase 2 of the Urban Forest Plan, our next steps will be to develop the first draft of the plan. That will be happening this fall. We plan on presenting the first draft of the plan to Council for feedback during the first quarter of 2024. Public education materials will be developed for use by the City during that time as well. And we expect the project to be completed and the final draft ready in the second quarter of 2024. So that wraps up my presentation. Richard, Janelle, and I are here to answer your questions. If you have questions specific to the policy review, technical data analysis, or public engagement, Camille Lefrancois can help answer those ones. And then questions specific to Indigenous engagement can be directed to Peyton Meters.
Okay, well, we'll let the questions come out and you can direct. Councillor Harris, you're first. And this is Committee of the Whole, so it's not just questions. You're going to get comments and feedback as well.
I would never make a comment.
I might as well set the stage. I know what's going to happen.
Okay. Anyways, a question that I've got, do we have a listing? And it's topical right now. I was driving down West Park Boulevard the other day, coming up to Wilshire Boulevard, and there are a high number of boulevard trees that have died, and they're just kind of coming up here, there, and everywhere. So is there a plan to replace dead boulevard trees in new subdivisions that have ultimately gone past the point of where the developer is responsible for that in that area? And on the highway, on the right-hand side of Highway 15, south of 94th Street, there were trees planted there one time, but they were allowed to die, and they're just kind of come up as wild roots and whatnot. Do we have a plan to replace those? Because this is something that I've seen for a long time. We let those go and we don't replace them. And I know we do require developers to replace those trees that they plant in new developments within a certain period of time. But what are we doing to ensure the safeguard of those trees?
Yeah, through your chair to Councillor Harris, yes, we currently are looking at all of our boulevard tree planting this week, currently actively replacing many of our dying and dead boulevard trees. Ones that we can't get to this year will be incorporated into future plans, and this urban forest master plan will help identify areas that we can increase our tree canopy in.
Great. Second question. I have a frequent opportunity to ride through West River's Edge, and I know we've done a really good job of planting the clusters of trees, and there's some mixed species and whatnot down there in groupings of odd numbers, 5, 6, whatever. What are we doing relative to planting more interesting tree around the lake, up on top of the lake, between the river, the trail, and the lake, and on the west side in terms of creating a long-term vision? I worked for the city of Lethbridge many, many years ago when they planted trees around the West Lethbridge Lake. It is now a forest. So what are we doing down at West River's Edge, second question, to ensure that we've got a really nice canopy of trees down there? Natural trees that would normally have grown in that area before it was mined for gravel.
Right. So through your chair to Councillor Harris, we diversifying our tree canopy within the city, especially down at West River's Edge, because it is such a wide open, vast space, until we can kind of get some shelter belts created through trees that are, more hardy and wind resistant. We're going to try. We will keep increasing that tree planting until we get the tree belts, and then be able to plant trees that do survive here, but that are more temperamental to the winds and the cold weather. So it is, again, part of this plan will identify areas like that where we can increase.
So will we have a conversation during the upcoming budget about tree planting and things of that nature in conjunction with what you've done with this particular study?
Your Worship, to Councillor Harris, at this time, we don't have any requests for more tree planting in 2024 in the budget.
Okay, so there's nothing in budget.
No.
So if I want to see more trees or council wants to see more trees, then we have to ultimately have that discussion during the budget discussion or a notice of motion.
At this time, that's correct.
Fair enough. Good.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Macon.
I guess I just have a comment really for when this comes back. You know, reading through it, one of the things that I know that I wanted to see from this urban forest is not just the focus on the actual river valleys and our actual forested areas, but increasing tree canopy throughout the whole city. I know that there's certain areas, and there's a few cities in Saskatchewan and some, when, you know, I've flown into Toronto and kind of, when not close to Toronto, but far out, where you can really see when a community has invested in that and you're flying over it and it's just gorgeous canopy, but it doesn't become that way organically. You really, I think, have to invest in it. So that's something that I'd like to see the plan for, or like to help residents increase that and businesses. Just a question, simple question out of the Indigenous report was that I was unsure what timber rights are.
And I'll
thanks so much for your question.
Oh, there she is.
Yeah, I'm just learning about what this means for this specific nation. But Siksika shared that through the delivery and building of their treaties, that they had previously rights to timber harvesting in and around your area. And so the specific elders and community members that I was speaking to, Scotty Manygums was one of them, has plans to come into the area to help indicate where those might be located specifically, but it would be the rights of harvesting timber and timber trees specifically.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, folks. I thought the study looked good. It's full of information. The task that's in front of the three of you is trying to cull through that and making a plan that's affordable and manageable going forward. And I support your work. I look forward to hearing back from you in the future. Councillor Harris and Councillor Macon touched on it, and I'll add my support. I don't think you're going to find much pushback from council, at least this council, to increasing the budget for maintaining and growing our urban forest. I look at the forest and I tend to simplify things. We have the natural area and we have the developed area. The natural area we preserve and protect. I wonder if the authors considered in their report that in fact it's designed to burn every 40 or 50 years and we should anticipate lighting a fire down there sometime soon. I assume not. It's a rhetorical question, but let's be clear what we mean by natural, because it's not natural. What we're doing isn't natural anymore. I have a particular interest, though, in the developed areas of Fort Saskatchewan. I came across, and I think I shared with council, certainly discussed with a councillor or two, an article talking about the discovery again of Dutch elm disease in Saskatoon. And there has been examples of Dutch elms show up in the southern areas of Alberta over the last decade. I have some 35-foot elm trees that we planted in our backyard. I would really, 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 really not like to lose those trees. I would really, really not like to lose the trees on our boulevards that are much bigger and much older. So in that regard, I think the report is dead on. We're not doing a particularly good job, perhaps, in the area of preservation. The provincial government has a set of regulations, and it puts some requirements on municipalities as well for the treatment of elm trees and suspected problem trees or infected trees. And I think we could do more in this community. I think we need to be looking at those requirements and planning for them. I think we need to advise our citizens that it's not reasonable to run an extension cord across the sidewalk and tack it to the elm tree on your boulevard because you've done it for 30 years and nobody told you you couldn't. Don't touch them, period. Just don't touch them. So the Alberta Agricultural Pest Act talks about the municipal responsibilities when it comes to the preservation of elm trees and the protection or prevention of Dutch elm disease. And I would like your future report, this is coming back to council again sometime, to maybe spend a bit of time fleshing out how you might respond to those needs within the community. We might be premature, but I don't want to wait till it's here before we try to respond. In fact, I think it's critical. I think it would be an absolute disaster if we lost those trees. One last very short comment and I'll be done, Mayor Katcher. When I read the report and it said 8% of the urban area is covered by canopy, I thought that's nonsense until you spoke and you said it picked up our plant sites, which skew the results rather dramatically. It would be nice to have a number that talks about urban area, and I think we would find that our 8% is vastly higher and more in line with what I see when I look at Google images of Fort Saskatchewan. It's more than 8%. So I'll leave it at that for now. And again, thank you. I look forward to revisiting this sometime soon.
Okay, thank you. You went straight into where I was going to. When you talk about industrial land, you talk about the 8%. Same thing. We have industrial land, we have ag land, we have parks. And I'm a little bit flabbergasted that we got a fair score, because when I look out, I see a wonderful canopy of trees around this entire community, and we've done a lot of plantings. So I too have concerns when you try and pull industry and even our ag lands, which includes our new development areas. They're not going to have a whole bunch of trees. So those have to be taken out of the equation. And if we think we're going to start policy to make them do more on those, then we have a problem, because either we want some prosperity in this region or we just want forests. And I do love trees. I grew up on a farm, and I love being on a farm and going out, being in the river valleys and that. The next one that I had concerns about was the comments about the birch trees. Because I'm thinking back to when I came on council, and Councillor Westman at that time said we should plant a birch forest because there had been one somewhere in the River Valley years ago. And in doing the research, they said it was closer to where the Anthony Hendy is, and it was never in Fort Saskatchewan. So I'm curious how you're trying to suggest, unless you can show me pictures that were here, because I know when I'm going around, birch trees do not survive here. They're quite dead in most of our neighbors' yards because they just don't survive here. So when we hear comments like that, how are we saying, well, you know, we want to preserve all these birch trees or have more birch trees when they don't even grow here?
Your Worship, I will ask maybe our consultant who did the Indigenous consultation maybe to comment on this, because I believe this came from her consultation with Indigenous people. And I understand also the Indigenous engagement was not just reflected in Fort Saskatchewan, but we also talked to other Indigenous groups in the region. So I will let Peyton maybe to comment.
And I would like it reflected on Fort Saskatchewan, not on the rest of the region.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm glad that you brought that up, because you're right, we don't have any direct pictures that are reflective of birch being in your area. However, I will say Indigenous people were oral, and our history comes from oral tradition. And so the majority of the people who shared this comment with us were elders and knowledge keepers. So when we're speaking about the area of Fort Saskatchewan, we showed them maps. They're quite familiar with the parameters that we're speaking about. And so they actually indicated before colonization that Fort Saskatchewan was known as Birch Hills because of the many amounts of birch that was living within your area. And so I think there is some additional knowledge that's coming forth. We're still doing some of that traditional knowledge gathering from elders who are speaking about those things. But it was indicated specifically that within the area of Fort Saskatchewan, traditionally there were a lot of birch trees that were a part of your area. I don't know if that answers your question, Councillor, if there's something I can maybe add to that for you.
Okay, so I'm Mayor Ketcher, by the way. And so I guess where I'm coming from, and this is going back from when I was on council in 2007 to 2010, when Councillor Westman had actually brought up the fact that, well, we should plant a bunch of birch trees because there was some in the history. But then when they went further back, and if you go into the history, and I agree that the elders may remember, but it wasn't actually in Fort Saskatchewan. It was actually towards the east side of Edmonton by the Anthony Henday, where there was maybe clusters of birch trees. So sometimes in the interpretations, we get held to a different standard because it's the remembrance that there was something, but it wasn't here in this community. And I mean, even when we talk about Turner Park, I go back. I hope you guys will just indulge me for a minute. When we talk about Turner Park, I go back, and when I do the history on this, and I love history, you know, there was Strachan's, and then there was a sawmill down there before that. And then you talk about Joseph Turner being down there. He was apparently a carpenter that was down there. And you know, so I think in interpretation, when we're talking about oral history, I think there's more interpretation that is more, I'm not going to say more valuable, but reflects more accurately on what actually happened down there. And that's where I have concerns sometimes, that we're trying to hold ourselves to a higher standard than, you know, like when we even talk about, you know, we want to do something down there, whether it's, I'm going to say campground. You know, there was so much development down there before that even happened. And then a lot of trees grew and filled in, and industry came, and, you know, so I understand where this engagement's coming from, but I'm not sure of the accuracy of it. So I know when I do my research, it seems to be different. And I'm just going to go on record as those comments. So I'll leave it with that. But I definitely like to see the plan come back without industrial and ag lands and our parklands, because I don't think we're giving up our parks. Okay. Councillor Blizzard.
Thanks for your presentation. Just some comments. First of all, I like trees. We have trees in our yard. But having said that, I think I walk around West River's Edge in particular a lot, and I see lots of planting, which is good. But I almost want to say we want to be careful with how much we plant. One of the things I like walking there is I feel safe, especially with my little dog, with being able to spot coyotes. When I'm walking there, any wildlife, I guess, but that's kind of the most common one. If we close it off too much, I think I'd end up walking in the streets more, because it makes me nervous if I can't spot them far enough ahead. So I think we have to be careful with our planting, and we also like open areas. I know when I go into some of the parks, sometimes open fields are nice for, it doesn't have to be just a soccer field. You can just kick a ball on any field. So it's nice if we have some open areas still. It scares me when you mentioned that we have 3 trees. What was it? Ash, elm, and spruce that are the most common. 2 out of the 3 are very rare in other big parts of North America because of pine beetle, the ash borer, the Dutch elm disease, and I guess we don't have the pines, but pine beetles are also eliminate a lot of trees. Are we working on getting more diversity in some of our forests? Because that's, and in our boulevard trees, in our, I guess, everywhere. So that to me is scary.
Through your chair to Councillor Blizzard, yeah, that's one of the unfortunate things for the region that we live in. Our climate zone being zone 3, there's only so many trees that we can pull from. There are a variety that we could use, but that fit well within our boulevards and our boulevard sizes fruit bearing or non-fruit bearing trees. So it's unfortunately a short list that we can pull from.
And do you do studies on the bugs? I happened to walk down one street where there was all kinds of yellow, and it's a sticky strip. Are we doing it to see how many bugs are there? Is that like a test thing?
We do, yeah. We currently, every year, we monitor for specific bugs, and then if there's anything that's new in the region, we also identify that and try and combat if it's a concern.
Okay. And I know I like the idea of encouraging homeowners to plant trees. Are these new small lots a bit of an issue though? Like as we've gone, all the new areas tinier, you put one, especially if it's like a spruce, it would eat up the whole backyard. I wouldn't even consider it. But even any of the other trees, it can overwhelm the backyard and people may not want it. Like I wonder if there's a kind of a limit of size of yards just so that we can keep a canopy.
Through the mayor to Councillor Blizzard, we're hoping that this report and this plan can help inform other the land use bylaw, some of our developing policies, and hoping that maybe in the future our area structure plans can pull from the knowledge of this plan to take tree planting considerations in the forefront, right? Mm-hmm. Especially council's wishes of increasing our tree canopy within the city.
Okay. Thank you. That's all.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Nguyen.
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate the subject that Councillor Blizzard has broached about boulevard trees and the setbacks in small pocket sizes with zero lot lines, and then what we've approved last year that we're seeing built out right now. I do have some question just about boulevard trees. Like, are we currently, and maybe in the last 5-10 years, optimizing tree planting with the species for the space that boulevards do accommodate so they don't grow into underground infrastructure, sidewalks and things like that? Maybe you can speak to that a little bit, because elm spruce and what was the other one? The ash, they're obviously massive root systems. You're not going to be planting spruce in a boulevard area, but like for example, where I live down Low Avenue, you're seeing a lot of heaving because of these massive mature trees, which are gorgeous, provide a great tree canopy, but obviously as they age, they need to be pruned back, and then infrastructure needs to be altered to accommodate for them.
Through your chair to Councillor Nguyen, that's the balance, and that's the science of having infrastructure and the trees, allowing the space for the trees to grow and the root system to adapt in the area without causing harm to the underground infrastructure and our surface infrastructure is just part of that, the art and the balance of accommodating everything. It is becoming harder to do with the smaller city lots, but I think there's going to be some innovation and some maybe future directives of tree planting. There's something they refer to as a silvocell, where you're creating an underground space for the roots to want to grow deeper and not want to come up to the surface. So there are ideas and plans out there. It's cost-benefit analysis and considerations.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm aware of those cells from rehabilitation done in the city of Edmonton. But yeah, I don't know if that cost would go over to the developer, the city, or what that would look like. And just another comment then on boulevard trees. So there's a nice timeline under why we need the urban forest protection plan about the life cycle of a tree, basically in an urban climate or urban region. And I'm just wondering if over mature stress trees are occurring in the life cycle of urban trees more because of what they're up against. In older areas of Fort Saskatchewan, it would be above ground utilities, power lines and things like that, which elicit needing to be pruned back to accommodate for that infrastructure. Is there anything that we're doing to prolong the longevity of these trees so that they don't end up dying as it shows in the picture?
Through your chair to Councillor Nguyen, not currently. We're just trying to plant as many trees as possible, as well as giving the space for the utilities. And most trees will survive and extend live to their life expectancies. Yeah, not specifically.
Okay. I might have looked at that diagram in the wrong light, but yeah, thanks for that answer.
Okay, thank you. Round 2, Councillor Harris.
Ms. Hart, I got a maintenance question for you, and it goes to the longevity of tree canopy and the usefulness of our parks. In William Casey Park, for example, we have quite a few spruce or conifer trees, which are probably in the neighborhood of about 25 or so years old. So they typically are running about 30 to 35 feet tall, and their canopy spread, near the ground is probably in the neighborhood of about 4 feet. Have we considered the opportunity to prune the base of those conifers up to about the height of somebody sitting on a riding mower so that they can maintain the area at the bottom of the tree as opposed to just letting it go crazy? I'm thinking about the trees are in the little bit of the drainage channel right beside the path that goes up to where our lift station is, for example. When I walk through there, and it goes to the whole issue of from a SEPTED standpoint, crime prevention through environmental design, that ultimately is a hiding place. So have we considered, and would it make sense to be able to prune some of our conifers in trees so that we can maintain underneath them, so that we can have more of a kind of a ground, less covered ground? Because when I walk through there, I would tend to think that maintaining the grass and park space would be easier, faster, if we can do that to the tree. I've got a large fir tree in my backyard, spruce tree in my backyard, and I had a pond underneath, or I have a pond underneath it, and I took it up about 7 feet, and it hasn't done anything negative to the tree that I can see. If anything, I think it's actually helped it. So what's your thought about that from a maintenance standpoint, so that we can be effective in our maintenance tactics in our parks and open space?
Yeah, so through your chair to Councillor Harris, it's pruning a spruce tree from the bottom up is an aesthetics thing for some people who might not like the look of the tree. It's not the intent of the tree, but from a maintenance perspective, absolutely, it is absolutely easier to get the ride-on mower closer. From an operational standpoint, when you do that, sometimes you are having the opportunity for the lower trunk to sprout out again more branches, and so there would be a little bit of a maintenance, but we do want to bring our trees up a little bit so that at least the mower can get closer underneath the tree and you're not having to come back and line trim.
Yeah, I think there are lots of examples in Fort Saskatchewan where that would make sense from a maintenance standpoint. Aesthetically, my personal point of view, I don't see a problem with that. I see a problem with unmaintained green area below a tree with a lot of dead limbs just there. They've kind of reached the end of their lifespan, and I'm thinking that type of maintenance would actually be beneficial. It would certainly open up the area, and I think it would probably create less of a kind of a hiding area for coyotes. Councillor Burgett.
Okay, you're good. Okay, that looks like about all the comments, feedback, questions. So I guess just last question. So coming out of this, you received a whole bunch of feedback and a whole bunch of comments. So kind of what's the expectation, what we're going to see with the next step?
Your Worship, as we described, we basically today was an opportunity for us to have a discussion and to have an update with council on where we're at, gather the discussion, the feedback, take some note, and I'm sure that our consultant also took some note on some of your comments that you share with us today. And basically the next phases now will be for the consultant to start drafting the plan. And from there you will see a draft in early 2024 for, again, you will be able to provide comments as always. And but at this time your comment has been noted, and also we can go back to the recording as well if we need more specificity on comments, and basically our consultant can take this as input as well.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Lots of good, frank comments here today. All right, so thank you very much. Last item, Councillor inquiries of administration. Are there any? Not seeing any. We have no closed session to go to. So with that, I will say we are adjourned at 4:34 p.m. Thank you.